A doctor's odyssey in ancient Tibet. What if you woke up one morning, not in your cozy bed, but in a freezing, windswept village 1,100 years in the past, with no phone, no internet, and a deadly plague threatening to wipe out everyone around you? Could you survive? Could you save them? In this gripping tale, meet Dr. Grace Harper, a modern American doctor hurled into the heart of ancient Tibet in 900 AD, where a mysterious lung disease is choking the life out of an entire village. Will her 21st century knowledge be enough to defy death and destiny? Stick with us to uncover a story of courage, cunning, and a secret that could change everything you think you know about time itself. The sun hadn't yet crested the jagged peaks of the Tibetan plateau, but its faint glow painted the sky in hues of amber and frost. Dr. Grace Harper, a 32-year-old pulmonologist from Seattle, blinked against the biting wind, her breath catching in her throat, not from the cold, but from sheer disbelief. Moments ago, she'd been in her lab at Harborview Medical Center, analyzing X-rays under fluorescent lights, the hum of her coffee machine a comforting constant. Now, she stood on a rocky outcrop overlooking a cluster of yak-hair tents and mud brick huts, their chimneys coughing black smoke into the dawn. The air smelled of burning juniper and desperation. This was no dream. This was real. Grace's mind raced, replaying the last thing she remembered. A late-night experiment with a peculiar device her colleague, Dr. Ethan Caldwell, had found at an estate sale. A bronze, gear-like contraption etched with strange symbols. Probably just a steampunk art piece, Ethan had joked, but when Grace touched it, a pulse of light had swallowed her whole. Now here she was, her scrubs torn, her stethoscope dangling uselessly around her neck, in a world that didn't know antibiotics or oxygen tanks. The year, she would later learn from a weathered trader, was 900 AD. Tibet, a land of mysticism, hardship, and a creeping sickness that was killing its people. She stumbled into the village of Kar, a remote settlement nestled in a valley shadowed by snow-dusted mountains. The villagers, wrapped in coarse wool and furs, stared at her with a mix of awe and suspicion. Her pale skin, auburn hair tied in a messy bun, and strange robes marked her as an outsider. But it was their coughs that stopped her cold, racking, wet, relentless. As a lung specialist, Grace knew the sound too well. A disease was ravaging their lungs, likely tuberculosis or something close, spread by the cramped tents and unventilated fires. Children wheezed, elders gasped, and the air itself seemed to carry death. Grace's first instinct was to run, back to the ridge, back to the device, back to Seattle. But the device was gone, lost in the chaos of her arrival. And then she saw her, a girl, no older than 10, named Tsering, her lips blue, her eyes pleading as she clutched her mother's hand. Grace's heart clenched. She'd spent her career saving lives in sterile operating rooms, but this was different. This was raw, urgent, primal. If she didn't act, Tsering and countless others would die. Her knowledge, her modern, scientific knowledge, was their only hope. Kneeling beside Tsering, Grace ignored the villagers' murmurs and pressed her fingers to the girl's wrist, counting her pulse. Too fast, too weak. "Breathe with me," Grace whispered, guiding Tsering through slow, deliberate inhales. The girl's mother, a woman with braided hair and weathered hands, watched in silence, her eyes wide with hope and fear. Grace didn't speak their language, but healing was universal. She rummaged through her pockets, finding only a half-empty pack of vitamin C tablets, useless against a plague, but a spark of an idea flickered. If she could teach them, if she could adapt her knowledge to this ancient world, she might save them. The village headman, a grizzled man named Dorj, approached, his fur-lined cloak sweeping the ground. Through a trader who spoke scraps of a dialect Grace could barely parse, he demanded to know who she was. "A healer," she said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "Sent by the spirits." It was a lie, but a necessary one. The villagers' eyes lit up, some with reverence, others with doubt. Dorj's gaze lingered, calculating. "Prove it," he said, gesturing to the coughing masses. "Or you'll answer to the gods." Grace's stomach twisted. She was no miracle worker, just a doctor with a medical degree and a knack for problem-solving. But as she looked at Tsering's frail form, then at the sea of desperate faces. She knew she couldn't walk away. This wasn't just about survival. It was about rewriting the fate of an entire village. Somewhere in this frozen, ancient land, there was a way to fight the disease, to earn their trust, and maybe, just maybe, to find her way home. But first, she had to face the sickness, the skepticism, and a ticking clock she didn't yet know existed. Grace Harper stood in the heart of Carr Village, the icy wind tugging at her torn scrubs as she surveyed the cluster of tents and mud brick huts. The villagers' coughs echoed like a grim chorus, a reminder of the lung disease strangling their community in 900 AD Tibet. She'd been a pulmonologist in Seattle, armed with CT scans and antibiotics. Now, she was a stranger in a strange land, her only tools her wits, a half-empty pack of vitamin C tablets, and a desperate need to prove herself. The headman, Dorge, had given her a chance to save the village, but his eyes held a warning: fail, and she'd be cast out, or worse. Grace wasn't just fighting a plague. She was fighting for her place in this world and, maybe, a way back to her own. Teaching survival, the birth of vitamin C. Grace started with what she knew: breathing. In her Seattle clinic, she taught COPD patients diaphragmatic breathing to ease their lungs. Here it could buy time. She gathered a small group of villagers: Heroine, the frail girl with blue-tinged lips, her mother Lama, and a handful of curious onlookers in a yak-hair tent. Using gestures and broken translations via a trader named Jigme, Grace demonstrated slow, deep breaths, her hands pressing against her own diaphragm. In through your nose, out through your mouth, she said, her voice calm but firm. Heroine mimicked her wheezes softening slightly. The villagers gasped, as if witnessing magic. Grace smiled, but inside, she knew breathing exercises were a bandage on a gaping wound. She needed medicine. Her mind raced through her medical training. Tuberculosis was likely the culprit, common in cramped, smoky conditions like these. Antibiotics were centuries away, but nature might offer allies. In her residency, she'd studied herbal remedies, dismissed as alternative but rooted in ancient wisdom. She recalled thyme and licorice root, both antimicrobial, both potentially growing in these mountains. She turned to Jigme. Plants. Strong smells. Like, she mimicked sniffing a pungent herb. Jigme's eyes lit up, and he led her to a patch of wild thyme near a frozen stream. Licorice root, he said, grew higher up, guarded by a surly herder named Kalsang. Grace's first breakthrough came when she crushed thyme into a steaming pot of water, teaching the villagers to inhale the vapor. Steam cleans the lungs, she explained, her hands animated, her voice carrying the confidence of a TED Talk speaker. The villagers, skeptical but desperate, tried it. Heroine's cough eased, and Lamo wept with relief. Grace, seizing the moment, pulled out her vitamin C tablets, their bright orange coating a stark contrast to the drab tint. These, she said, holding one up, are magic for my land. Vitamin C. The name stuck, and the villagers whispered it like a sacred mantra. It was a placebo, but hope was a powerful drug. The vitamin C gambit worked too well. Word spread, and soon villagers lined up, begging for the magic pills. Grace's heart sank. She had only a dozen left. She rationed them, giving slivers to the sickest, while promising more magic soon. Her humor, a dry Seattle wit, slipped through as she joked, "Vitamin C isn't candy, folks." The villagers didn't get the joke, but her warmth drew smiles, bridging the gap between her world and theirs. The shaman's shadow. Not everyone was charmed. Enter Lama Senji, the village's revered shaman, a wiry man with eyes like burning coals and a voice that could summon storms. Senji saw Grace's methods as an affront to the gods. In a smoky ritual tent, he chanted over a dying elder, waving yak bone talismans and burning bitter herbs that made Grace's eyes water. "The spirits demand offerings, not your strange breaths," he thundered, pointing at her. The villagers, torn between fear of the gods and hope in Grace, wavered. Senji's influence was ironclad. He guided Carr through famines and avalanches, his visions supposedly foretold by the mountain spirits. Grace, to him, was a heretic. The tension boiled over at a village council by a roaring bonfire. Senji accused Grace of angering the spirits, blaming her for a sudden snowstorm that buried their grazing lands. "Her foreign magic brings doom," he bellowed, his robes flapping like raven wings. Grace, standing her ground, shot back. "The spirits didn't save Tsering's cough. My magic did." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Dorj, the headman, silenced them with a raised hand. "Prove your worth, healer," he said, his voice low but sharp, "or Senji's rituals will decide our fate." Grace's pulse raced. She needed allies. Jigme, the traitor, became her translator and spy, whispering that Senji feared losing power. Tsering's mother, Lamo, became her advocate, spreading word of the Vinci miracle. But Grace knew herbs, and hope wouldn't be enough. She needed a real cure, and fast. The licorice root was her best shot, but Cal Sang, the herder, demanded payment. Yakwal Grace didn't have. In a bold move, she offered her stethoscope, its shiny metal gleaming like a relic. Cal Sang, awestruck, accepted, and Grace trekked up the mountain, her lungs burning in the thin air, to gather the precious root, pushing the stakes higher. Back in the village, Grace worked feverishly, grinding thyme and licorice root into a paste, mixing it with boiled water to create a crude syrup. She tested it on herself first, gagging at the bitter taste, but feeling no ill effects. She distributed it to the sick, teaching them to sip it slowly. The results were slow but promising. Tsering's color improved, and others coughed less violently. Yet Senji's influence grew. He spread rumors that Grace's potions were poison, and some villagers, gripped by fear, refused her treatment. Grace felt the walls closing in. Every cough was a ticking clock, every suspicious glance a reminder of her precarious position. Then came the turning point. Jigme brought news. Dorj's own son, a strapping young man named Norbu, had fallen ill, his coughs shaking the headman's tent. Dorj summoned Grace at dawn, his face etched with fear. "Save him," he pleaded, his authority crumbling, "or the gods will judge you." Grace's hands trembled as she examined Norbu, his fever high, his breathing shallow. This was her moment. Save Norbu, and she'd win the village. Fail, and Senji would have her head. Grace doubled down, combining her syrup with steam treatments and relentless optimism. She sat with Norbu through the night, her voice soothing as she coached his breathing, her hand steady as she applied the paste. By morning, Norbu's fever broke, and his cough softened. Dorj's relief was palpable, but Senji's fury was volcanic. "This is no cure," he roared, rallying his followers. "The spirits will punish us." The village split, half chanting for Grace, half for Senji. The air crackled with tension, and Grace knew her next move had to be flawless. This section throws you into Grace's high-stakes gamble, blending science, wit, and raw human drama. Her Vinci ploy is both clever and hilarious, sparking curiosity about how far her modern tricks can go. Senji's opposition adds a delicious layer of conflict, pitting reason against superstition in a way that feels primal and urgent. The vivid imagery, Tibetan winds, smoky tents, bitter herbs, pulls you into this ancient world, while Grace's resourcefulness and humor keep you rooting for her. Norbu's illness raises the stakes to a fever pitch, making every decision feel life or death. You're left wondering, can Grace outsmart Senji? Will her crude medicine hold up? And what's this Komai Thoijon lurking in the shadows? The stage is set for a heart-pounding climax. The air in Kar village crackled with tension as the sun dipped behind the snow-capped peaks, casting long shadows over the gathered crowd. Dr. Grace Harper, the time-displaced pulmonologist from Seattle, stood at the center of a storm. Her herbal syrup and breathing techniques had saved Dorj's son, Norbu, but the village remained divided. Half saw her as a savior, chanting her name with fervent hope. The other half, swayed by Lama Senji's fiery sermons, branded her a heretic whose foreign magic would doom them all. Now, the headman Dorj had issued an ultimatum. Grace had 5 days to save the entire village from the lung plague, or be banished to the merciless Tibetan wilderness. The clock was ticking, and failure meant death, not just for her, but for the villagers she'd come to care for. In this high-altitude crucible, Grace's modern knowledge, grit, and a touch of Seattle sass would face their ultimate test. The ultimatum, 5 days to defy death. Dorj's proclamation came at dusk, his voice booming over the bonfire-lit council. "The gods have spoken through me," he declared, his fur cloak billowing in the wind. "The healer from afar has 5 days to end the coughing death. If she fails, she will face the mountain's judgment." The crowd murmured, some nodding in awe, others clutching prayer beads, their eyes darting to Senji. The shaman smirked, his coal-black gaze fixed on Grace. "The spirits will expose her lies," he hissed, waving a yak-bone staff. Grace's heart pounded, but she met his stare, her voice steady. 5 days. I'll do it in 4. The crowd gasped, and even Dorj raised an eyebrow. Her bravado was a gamble, but she needed their trust, and time was not her friend. Grace's mind churned as she retreated to her makeshift clinic, a smoky tent filled with coughing villagers. Tuberculosis, or something like it, was killing them. Her thyme and licorice syrup was slowing the disease, but it wasn't enough. She needed scale, enough medicine for hundreds, not dozens, and she needed it fast. Her only allies were Jigme, the quick-witted trader who translated her words, and Lamo, Tsering's mother, who now rallied other women to gather herbs. But Senji's influence was a growing shadow. He'd begun nightly rituals, burning pungent herbs and chanting for the gods to cleanse the village of Grace's taint. Worse, rumors swirled that he'd poisoned the minds of Dorj's guards, who now watched Grace's every move. Her first move was logistics. She calculated, to treat the village, she'd need gallons of syrup, requiring a massive haul of thyme and licorice root. The thyme was plentiful, but licorice grew high in the mountains, guarded by Cal Sang, the herder who'd taken her stethoscope. Grace trekked to his camp, her lungs burning in the thin air, only to find him doubled over, coughing. The plague had reached him too. "Help me," he rasped, "and I'll give you all the root you need." Grace's heart sank. This was no coincidence. Senji had likely sent sick villagers to Cal Sang's camp to sabotage her supply. She treated Cal Sang with her dwindling syrup, teaching him her breathing exercises, and in return, he gave her sacks of licorice root, carried down by his yaks. But the journey cost her a day, and the clock was merciless. The sabotage, Senji's deadly gambit. Back in Kar, Grace organized the women, Lamo, Tsering, and a dozen others, into a production line. They crushed herbs, boiled water, and mixed syrup in clay pots, their hands stained green from thyme. Grace's Seattle-honed efficiency shone through. She taught them to sterilize tools with boiled water, a concept that baffled but impressed them. "Clean tools, clean lungs," she said, her dry humor cutting through their exhaustion. The tent buzzed with purpose, and for a moment, hope flickered. Tsering, now stronger, even cracked a smile, calling Grace Dr. Veen C. with a giggle. But Senji struck. On the 3rd night, Grace woke to screams. Her tent was ablaze, flames licking the yak hair walls. She grabbed her syrup pots and stumbled out, coughing in the smoke, only to see Senji's followers hurling torches. "The gods demand fire," they chanted, their faces twisted with zeal. Jigme pulled Grace to safety, but half her herb stock was ash. Worse, the fire spread, destroying several homes and leaving villagers shivering in the snow. Senji seized the chaos, blaming Grace at a dawn council. "Her potions brought this curse," he roared, pointing to the charred tents. The crowd wavered, fear overtaking hope. Dorj's face was unreadable, but his silence was deafening. Grace's stomach churned. 3 days left, and her supplies were gutted. She confronted Senji outside his ritual tent, her voice low but fierce. "You're killing them with fear, not saving them." He laughed, his eyes glinting. "You'll be gone before the moon wanes, outsider." Grace realized then, this wasn't just about faith. Senji feared her power, her ability to sway the village. He'd burn it all down before yielding. The breakthrough, a desperate plan. With time slipping away, Grace pivoted. She couldn't rebuild her stock in 2 days, but she could amplify her impact. She recalled a public health tactic from her residency. Treat the influencers, and the rest follow. Dorj's guards, Senji's followers, even the children. They were the key. She doubled her efforts on Norbu, Dorj's son, who was now walking, his cough nearly gone. She paraded him before the village, letting his recovery speak louder than Senji's chants. "Look at Norbu," she shouted, her voice carrying over the wind. "He breathes because of this." She held up a pot of syrup, its earthy scent wafting through the crowd. Lamo and Heroine echoed her, their voices rising in a chant of their own. "Vinci! Vinci!" Next, she targeted the guards. One, a young man named Pemba, was coughing badly. Grace treated him in secret, slipping him syrup and teaching him to breathe through a cloth to filter smoke. By day 4, Pemba stood taller, his loyalty shifting. He whispered to Grace that Senji planned a final ritual to exorcise her at dawn on the 5th day, a ritual that might involve blood. Grace's blood ran cold, but she saw an opening. If she could expose Senji's fear-mongering, she could turn the tide. Her final gambit was bold, a public demonstration. On the 4th night, with Jigme's help, she gathered the village in the central square. She'd spent the day brewing a massive batch of syrup with her remaining herbs, enough for every sick villager. Under torchlight, she treated dozens, children, elders, even a skeptical guard, coaching their breathing, spooning out syrup, her hands steady despite her racing heart. "This isn't magic," she said, her voice clear. "It's knowledge. Your lungs can heal if you trust this." Heroine, now a beacon of health, stood beside her, passing out cups. The crowd watched, rapt, as coughs softened, faces brightened. Senji crashed the scene, his staff raised, his voice a thunderclap. "Blasphemy! She defies the gods." But Grace was ready. She pointed to Pemba, who stepped forward, his breathing clear. "The gods gave us herbs, not curses," Grace said. "Senji burns your homes. I rebuild your hope." The crowd roared, some cheering, others shouting at Senji. Dorj, watching from his throne-like seat, stood. "Enough," he bellowed. "The healer has 1 day left. Let the results speak." The resolution, triumph, and tension. By dawn on the 5th day, the village buzzed with change. Grace's syrup, combined with steam and breathing exercises, had eased the plague's grip. Dozens recovered, their coughs fading, their eyes bright with gratitude. Norbu led a procession, carrying a pot of syrup like a sacred relic. Lamo and Heroine sang Grace's praises, and even some of Senji's followers defected, sipping her magic. Senji, cornered, tried one last ritual, but the crowd drowned him out, chanting Dr. Vinci. Dorj, his face softened by his son's recovery, declared Grace a gift from the heavens. The village was saved for now, but the victory was bittersweet. As Grace accepted a woven shawl from Lamo, Jigme pulled her aside, his voice low. "Senji fled to the mountains," he whispered. "He spoke of a cave, a wheel of time hidden there. He said it brought you here." Grace's breath caught. The device that sent her to 900 AD, was it real? Was it close? Her heart raced with a new question. Could she find it and go home? Or would staying mean facing Senji's wrath, and whatever secrets the mountains held? This section is a roller coaster of suspense, betrayal, and triumph. Grace's race against the 5-day deadline, coupled with Senji's sabotage, keeps you on edge, wondering if her modern knowledge can outpace ancient superstition. The fire, the divided village, and the desperate herb-gathering trek amplify the stakes, while Grace's clever pivot to public health tactics feels both smart and thrilling. The public demonstration is a heart-pounding showdown, with Grace's wit and grit clashing against Senji's zeal. The resolution, her triumph over the plague, delivers a cathartic rush, but Jigme's whisper about the Wheel of Time reignites curiosity, leaving you hungry for what's next. The vivid imagery of flames, snowy peaks, and chanting crowds pulls you into this ancient world, while Grace's blend of vulnerability and defiance makes you cheer for her. Dr. Grace Harper stood atop a windswept ridge overlooking Kar Village, the icy air biting her cheeks as the sun rose over the Tibetan plateau in 900 AD. The lung plague that had gripped the village was retreating, thanks to her thyme and licorice syrup, breathing exercises, and sheer determination. The villagers, once divided, now hailed her as Dr. Vinci, a title whispered with reverence. Headman Dorj had declared her a gift from the heavens, and even Lama Senji's followers, shaken by her success, had begun to waver. But as Grace clutched the woven shawl Lamo had given her, a new shadow loomed. Jigme's whispered revelation about a wheel of time, hidden in a mountain cave, a device that might have brought her from Seattle to this ancient land, ignited a spark of hope and dread. Could she find it and return home? Or was her destiny now tied to this rugged world, with Senji's vengeance lurking in the peaks? This wasn't the end. It was a doorway to a mystery that would keep you guessing. The village reborn, a hero's welcome. The morning after the 5th day, Kar buzzed with life. The central square, once a battleground of fear and division, now thrummed with celebration. Villagers, their coughs softened or gone, gathered around a bonfire, their faces lit with gratitude. Sayering, the frail girl who'd first touched Grace's heart, danced with other children, her laughter cutting through the crisp air. Norbu, Dorj's son, stood tall, his recovery a living testament to Grace's magic. Lamo and the women who'd worked tirelessly to brew the syrup wove a garland of dried thyme, placing it around Grace's neck like a crown. "You saved us," Lamo said, her eyes glistening. Grace, her Seattle cynicism melting, felt a lump in her throat. "You saved yourselves," she replied, her voice soft but firm. "You trusted me." Dorj presided over the gathering, his fur cloak sweeping the ground. "The gods sent you, Dr. Veen C," he declared, raising a carved wooden cup. "Kar breathes because of you." The crowd roared, their voices echoing off the mountains. Grace smiled, but her mind was elsewhere. Saving the village had been her mission, but Jigme's words about the Wheel of Time gnawed at her. The bronze, gear-like device that had zapped her from her lab in Harborview Medical Center, was it real? Was it close? And why had Senji, the shaman who tried to burn her out, fled to the mountains with cryptic talk of this cave? The fugitive's threat, Senji's last stand. As the celebration peaked, Jigme pulled Grace aside, his face taut with urgency. "Senji didn't just flee," he whispered, glancing at the crowd to ensure no one overheard. "He took men, his loyalists. They're in the mountains, seeking the cave. He called it the wheel that turns the world. He believes it's a weapon, not a gift." Grace's pulse quickened. A weapon. Her mind flashed to the device's strange symbols, the pulse of light that had swallowed her. If Senji found it, could he wield it? Could he strand her here forever? Or worse, unleash chaos she couldn't fathom? She pressed Jigme for details. He described a forbidden cave, high in the peaks, guarded by ancient carvings, and whispered to house a relic older than the village itself. Senji had long claimed it was cursed, a place where spirits trapped intruders. "He's desperate," Jigme said. "Your victory shamed him. He'll do anything to reclaim power." Grace's stomach twisted. Senji's rituals had nearly destroyed her. His desperation could destroy everything. She glanced at Sayering, laughing by the fire, and Norbu, sharing yak butter tea with his father. She'd saved them, but for how long? That night, under a sky blazing with stars, Grace made a choice. She couldn't ignore the cave. If the Wheel of Time was the device that brought her here, it was her only shot at returning to Seattle, to her lab, her coffee machine, her life. But leaving meant risking everything she'd built, the trust of Kar, the lives she'd saved, the fragile hope she'd kindled. And what if Senji reached it first? She confided in Lamo, who gripped her hand. "You're one of us now," Lamo said. "But if the spirit sent you, maybe they want you to find this wheel." Grace nodded, her resolve hardening. She'd face the mountains, not just for herself, but to protect Kar from whatever Senji planned. The trek begins, a glimpse of the unknown. At dawn, Grace set out, guided by Jigme and Pemba, the guard she'd won over. They carried crude torches, bundles of time, and a small pot of her syrup, her only defense against the thin air and whatever lay ahead. The path was treacherous, a narrow trail winding through icy cliffs and howling winds. Grace's legs ached, her scrubs no match for the cold, but her Seattle grit pushed her forward. She thought of her residency nights, pulling 36-hour shifts, and channeled that endurance. "If I can survive med school," she muttered, "I can survive this." Halfway up, they found signs of Senji, a burned-out campfire, a broken yak bone talisman. He's close, Pemba whispered, his hand on his dagger. Grace's heart raced. The cave was near, its entrance marked by jagged stones carved with spirals, eerily like the symbols on the device that had brought her here. As they approached, a low hum vibrated through the ground, sending a shiver down her spine. Jigme froze. "The spirits," he whispered. Grace, her scientist's mind warring with awe, stepped closer. A faint glow pulsed from the cave's mouth, like the light that had swallowed her in Seattle. Before she could enter, a scream echoed. Senji emerged, his robes tattered, his eyes wild. "You!" he snarled, clutching a bronze object, the device, or a piece of it. "This is mine. The gods chose me." Behind him, two of his men brandished spears, their faces grim. Grace's breath caught. This was it, the moment that could decide her fate. She raised her hands, her voice steady despite the fear clawing her chest. "Senji, that device isn't a weapon. It's a bridge. Let me help you understand it." He laughed, a manic edge to his voice. "You'll never leave this mountain." The standoff was electric. Pemba drew his dagger. Jigme whispered a prayer, and Grace's mind raced. Could she outsmart Senji? Could she reach the device? The hum grew louder, the glow brighter, and the air seemed to pulse with possibility. Senji raised the device, its gears glinting, and for a moment, time itself seemed to waver. The story pauses here, on the edge of the cave, with Grace facing Senji and the mysterious Wheel of Time. Did she seize the device and find her way home? Or did Senji's desperation unleash a new catastrophe? The village of Kar breathes easier, but the mountains hold secrets that could change everything. Grace's journey, her courage, her wit, her heart, has only begun. What lies in that cave? Is it a ticket back to Seattle or a deeper plunge into Tibet's mysteries? And what of Senji's wrath? The answers await in the next chapter, where the past and future collide in ways you won't believe. Stay tuned to this channel for the thrilling continuation, because Grace's story is far from over, and the next twist will leave you speechless.